A stark warning from the US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He says China poses an imminent threat to Taiwan and is building the firepower to invade. Speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Hegseth urged Asia to ramp up defense spending and stand with the US to deter war, vowing America won't be pushed out of the region. But China now firing back, calling the US the biggest troublemaker out there, dismissing the rhetoric as provocative and destabilising. For more, we're joined by Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS in Sydney and the host of the Airport Economist channel right here on Ticker. Big words from Pete Hegseth and a big response from China.
Yeah, pretty big and unnecessary words, I think. I think most nations in the Asia-Pacific know the strategic position in the South China Sea, and they're all, in any case, improving their alliances and building up their defence capabilities. So in many ways, that sort of comment just states the obvious, and also gets the usual counter from Beijing and Beijing's usual positioning that they're responding to aggression.
Let's have a listen to what Pete Hegseth had to say at that Shangri-La conference.
Clear any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not.
Given that the US is shaking the tin to Western governments around the world, saying spend more on your defence, and guess what, you generally buy the stuff from us, is this essentially creating fear, as China says? How imminent is imminent, given that China itself has spoken about 2027 being the deadline of bringing the two nations, or one nation, whichever way you look at it, closer together?
Well, what's important to remember is that Taiwan has never been part of the People's Republic of China. It was part of nationalist China for 4 years or so. It's always been its own independent nation with indigenous and European and Japanese influence, as well as traditional Chinese influences. So it's a very, very different country to the People's Republic of China. Secondly, the US, the Defense Secretary is, asking us to increase our defense spending, which we were doing anyway, but at the same time putting on notorious and debilitating tariffs that will hinder our ability to be able to increase defence spending. So on one hand, the US is saying, get your act together on defence. On the other hand, it's really hurting our economies as well as their own. So in some ways, if they're more open on trade, I think, you'd get probably a better reception in terms of the call for defence spending, which most of the nations of the Asia-Pacific are in any case.
Do we need a wake-up call? Do countries like Australia need a wake-up call when it comes to defence spending?
I don't think so, in the sense that we've been, building our alliances with ASEAN and India, Japan and South Korea more proactively, in the last few years, particularly after China threatened Australia with tariffs and then put very high tariffs on in the wake of COVID. So in some ways, I think Australia's quite aware of the importance of the Indo-Pacific strategically. And also, defending Taiwan is not just important to defend a liberal democracy, but it's important to defend Taiwan because Taiwan is is the first port of call for all of us. We need a peaceful Indo-Pacific, not dominated by the People's Republic of China. And if they're allowed to be aggressive towards a neighbour like Taiwan, like Russia's doing to Ukraine, then that would have severe consequences for the other nations of the Indo-Pacific.
I know, Tim, that you've spent a fair bit of time in Taiwan. It's very close to your heart. I was in Taipei just a few weeks ago, as you know, and the idea that there would be some sort of invasion feels so far from the realms of possibility. But we have continually seen Chinese aggression, the warships getting closer and encircling the island for the first time, planes doing a whole bunch of testing as well. Do you think it's really possible?
Yeah, look, I think it's very difficult in any case. I think Taiwan's very underrated. Its alliances with the various nations of the Indo-Pacific, apart from the US, is underrated and underestimated by people who think that is a possibility. And yeah, Taiwan's close to my heart, Aaron, but it's also close to my head. I mean, it's a very significant economy. You saw yourself couple of weeks ago in terms of AI and semiconductors. It's an important economic player in the world. You know, if it wasn't for the position with China, it would be an OECD nation. It would be, you know, part of part of the WHO, it'd be part of the TPP, as you know, as it is a WTO and an APEC nation. So, you know, it's a very significant nation of strategic importance to all of us. And in some ways, you know, China should be more like Taiwan rather than the opposite.
Yes, when I went there, I was actually warned by your producer, who said to me that Taiwan is what China should be like. But since the 1970s, the UN, the United States, has recognised mainland China as the official China. I flew on China Airlines, which was a Taiwanese carrier. It would be confusing for the mainland having this kind of mini version that's an open democracy, and they no doubt want to bring it together. Do you understand from, I guess, the Chinese side why they want that unity to occur?
Well, I think a lot of those resolutions were passed when nations before recognised Taiwan as all of China. Now, Taiwan doesn't want to be all of China. Taiwan just wants to be Taiwan. So it's quite a significant difference to those days. And there's no doubt that people recognise Beijing and the People's Republic of China, mainland China, as that nation, and Taiwan and Taipei as the other nation. The other things like China Airlines, which of course sponsored my program too. I think they just don't want to revert to Taiwan Airlines because they don't want to go through all the paperwork. But ultimately, I think Taiwan just wants to be Taiwan and wants the status quo.
And just finally, do you think the rhetoric is actually helping or harming regional stability, what Pete Hegseth said?
Yeah, I thought the rhetoric wasn't helpful and in many ways quite naive of a new Defense Secretary to put it out that way. There's been those warnings in the US before, behind closed doors, very methodically and multilaterally with our major allies, and that's very different.
Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS, appreciate your time here on Ticker. Thank you.